It's your Wednesday daily delivery. I am Michael Rand. Glad to have you back for another day. Hope you guys are having a good one out there today, and a really good show coming up right now. Randy Johnson from the Star Tribune joins me in a little bit. We're going to talk Gopher football, the whole PJ Fleck to UCLA saga that played out over the weekend. Nothing to it eventually. UCLA hiring former running back Deshaun Foster to be their head coach. He was an assistant there last year. Sounds like the Fleck stuff, though, was it was interesting. Randy gets into that a little bit. Sounds like there was some real interest on UCLA's part on bringing Fleck into the mix. It just didn't work out, and I think probably a good decision on PJ's part. But Randy and I will get to that more here in just a little bit, so stick around for that. He and I will also talk Gopher men's hockey. Randy was actually covering the Gophers series. They had a great weekend. They were 2 shutouts, but he was covering that as all of the Fleck stuff was bubbling up Friday and Saturday. So we'll get into that in just a little bit, both of those teams. Get into some Viking stuff that I think is interesting towards the end of the show. A Gophers team that is struggling mightily. We'll get to that here in just a little bit. First, though, what I missed. Let's start with the Wolves. No surprise, they win at Portland last night. First of 2 against Portland. Second of a road back-to-back. They had just beaten the Clippers on Monday night. Come back and beat Portland on Tuesday. Huge game from Ant. Sounds like he was maybe a game-time decision or thinking about sitting this one out because his knee was sore. He's kind of been battling through a few little kind of bumps and bruises throughout the year, but he decided to give it a go. Good thing he did. The Wolves needed him. He goes for 41 in this game, really gives them all the offense they really needed. But the fourth quarter was the deciding quarter. They actually had fallen. They followed into a 2-point deficit. It was 86-84 Portland. Rough start to the quarter for reserve Nickeil Alexander-Walker. He had a turnover. He fouled on a 3-pointer. All of a sudden, Portland's got some life. Portland, one of the worst teams in the league this season. You're giving them life, letting them hang around. But then Walker goes on a huge heater. 4 3-pointers, 18-4 run. Wolves end up closing this game out with relative ease, even if it got kind of tense in the fourth quarter. Now, couple things off this game. Number one, little bit of a Nickeil Alexander-Walker appreciation moment here, just for all he's brought to the team. What that trade, almost this time last year, brought to the Wolves, where they shipped out D'Angelo Russell, brought in 3 second-round picks. Don't forget about that. 3 second-round picks, plus Mike Conley Jr., plus Nickeil Alexander-Walker. That was a haul. Gave them a starting point guard, a replacement for D'Angelo Russell, who certainly fits this team better. I know D'Lo's been on a nice run with the Lakers, but he's a little bit more inconsistent, a little bit more of a ball-needy kind of player on a team that maybe doesn't need that right now. Conley's been a great fit. Alexander-Walker was, we've talked about this. He kind of felt like a throw-in in that trade. He didn't really know what you were getting. I think he was on the last year of his deal, but they end up re-signing him in the offseason. He ends up being a nice rotation player, can play a bit of point guard, can do a little bit of this, really good on defense, can make a 3 like he did last night. I think he was 5 of 6 for the game from 3-point range. Just the kind of player you need to be a successful team in the regular season and once you get to the postseason. Now they're just kind of adding these depth pieces. The Monte Morris trade, another example. I mean, you look at their 9 deep right now with those 2 guys on the bench, as well as Naz Reid and Kyle Anderson. Man, that's a really good 9 deep lineup. That's not even counting guys that could get some run if they needed to. Guys like Jordan McLaughlin, some of their other younger players, guys who have done it before, but they don't need them to do it right now. So it's just thinking about that, thinking about where Alexander Walker's game has come from and where it's getting to. And I think one of the big things he's talked about is confidence, the confidence to kind of play through those tough moments. And he talked about it again after the game on Tuesday. Let's listen to that.
Anybody who knows me knows it's not that easy. They know I struggle with that a lot. I care a lot. And for so long, I had to realize that basketball is not only my identity, but it's just the game was everything for me. And so there's times I can lose myself in the game, and good and bad. But I think it's just been a focus for me to grow as a player, to know that the only way for me to improve now is to kind of like separate that stuff and just to be able to enjoy the moment and be in the moment, good and bad.
And again, this is a guy who was like struggling to find a role, hadn't really carved out a niche in the NBA. And if you're not a star, if you're not, one of those guys that's going to be competing for the All-Star game, competing to be on, the All-NBA teams, things like that, if you're not one of the big 2 or 3 on a roster, you have to figure out pretty quick what you do well. You've got to figure out, hey, what's my role here? How do I fit in? How can I use what I do best to complement what else is going on in this roster? And I think, for a young player, and Alexander-Walker's still relatively young, for a younger player, that can be a challenge. You grow up, you're probably the best player on your team for a long time. If you got to the NBA, until you got to the NBA, you were probably the best player on almost every team you were on. And maybe you were on some kind of select team at some point with some other future NBA player, things like that. But your high school team, your college team, your youth teams, like you were always or almost always the best player. When you have to come to the NBA and then all of a sudden it's like, oh man, like everybody here is the best in the world. How do I fit into this? I think that is a challenge. And then when it doesn't happen right away, you lose some confidence, things like that. You got to carve out that role. I think Alexander-Walker is doing that now to the Wolves' benefit. Chris Finch agrees. Here was Finch on Alexander-Walker after the game.
Yeah, he's probably grown the most with his kind of composure. More, he doesn't seemingly get rattled when he makes. He's always had a habit to kind of get down on himself when he has made some tough plays, but he plays through that now and bounces back. He understands, defensively, that's where it all starts for him, and he's just, this decision making on offense has been really quick and for the most part really, really clean. And so, but that all comes from just, I think, having a little bit more composure.
So again, most nights it's going to be Edwards, it's going to be Karl Anthony Towns, it's going to be Rudy Gobert that have to get the Wolves to an elite level. But you also have to have that supporting cast if you are going to be a true title contender. And speaking of that, Kendrick Perkins, NBA commentator, said on Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it, Tuesday night, the Timberwolves have been standing on business all season long. I don't know about how y'all feel, but I'm leaning towards them being legit title contenders. Title contenders in all, or not in all caps, but each of the first 2 letters capitalized. Good night and carry the hell on. Kendrick Perkins, he's pretty bombastic, can be pretty bombastic. He's been on TV before. I think that's interesting. The Wolves, I think people don't quite figure out where the Wolves fit into this. And it's funny because people are blasting him now because he said the other day that he likes the Clippers, things like that. People are saying you're talking out of both sides of your mouth. You can say a team is a title contender without saying they are going to win the championship. And I think right now you have to put the Wolves in the mix of a handful of teams that during the regular season are separating themselves. What that means when you get to the postseason for a team that hasn't won a playoff series in 20 years, I don't know what that means once you get that far. I do know this. They are playing right now at a consistent enough level. They've had some lulls, but we know, I think at this point in the season, 2/3 of the way in, we know what they are. I don't know if they're going to win the NBA championship. I think they should at least win a first-round playoff series, but I think we at least are starting to figure out now that this is a team you can trust. Doesn't mean they're going to win. Doesn't even mean they're going to win a first-round playoff series. I think they should, but man, they could wind up playing the Lakers. They could wind up playing the Warriors. They could wind up playing somebody really good, the Mavericks, the Suns even, in the first round of the playoffs. Like, the West is just so hard to predict, so hard to know. You could be a great team and lose a tough series even in the first round, but I think this team does have a ceiling that people should recognize. I don't know exactly what that ceiling is yet in terms of what they will accomplish. I do know that I'm starting to trust them more, and I think that's what Kendrick Perkins was trying to say there.
Grand Casino would like to take a moment and salute the true football fan. The passion, the hope, the anticipation, that incomparable feeling of winning. Grand Casino would also like to take a moment to remind you that you can find all that anticipation, thrill, and winning at Grand Casino. Grand Casino. Let your story begin.
I want to bring in Randy Johnson from the Star Tribune right now. Randy covers Gopher football and Gophers men's hockey at the Star Tribune, and that meant you were pretty busy this past weekend, Randy.
Yeah, well, kind of like nervous as a long-tailed cat in a room full of rocking chairs there. It was.
I've heard that before. That's good. So you're covering Gopher hockey over the weekend. And Friday, we get word that UCLA is, Chip Kelly is bolting UCLA to become the offensive coordinator at Ohio State. You start seeing all sorts of things that say UCLA thinks PJ Fleck would be an awfully good candidate. There's kind of this like 24-hour period where it's like, hey, what's going on here? Is this like a real thing? Fleck tweets on Saturday night, hey, reaffirming that he's, happy to be with the Gophers, getting ready for 2024. What was that process like in your mind, and kind of what was the level of what was going on there in your reporting and your understanding of this?
Yeah, the process. You see the move by Chip Kelly, and then you see some speculation by some national writers, and you have to pay attention to that because they're a lot of these guys are pretty tied in with the subjects that they're dealing with. So yeah, you see a name there, it's okay. We gotta investigate here, see what's going on, and yeah, found out there, didn't find a lot out on Friday, but Saturday found out, okay, there's some legitimate interest in PJ Fleck from UCLA, and we're gonna see what's gonna happen here as the day progressed, and yeah, it was I was pretty happy to see the tweet come out on Saturday night after I just finishing up writing my story on Saturday's Gophers hockey game, which is an afternoon one. Yeah, mainly because of the amount of work that was going to require if there was a coaching change. And then it would have been a really tough situation for the Gophers this time of year with the recruiting done for the season. Then the transfer portal will be opening up for players to leave. You'd be looking at, would PJ be taking coaches with him, things like that. There was just going to be a lot of stuff going on, and it would not have been a good time for any program to have to change coaches. It's kind of like a musical chair. Somebody not going to get a chair, and it turned out it was UCLA and not the Gophers.
Now, again, like you said, there's definitely some interest in him. I wrote earlier this week that I thought Minnesota at this point is maybe a better, more stable job, that he maybe has something good going here versus what he could go for. There's definitely some attraction to what UCLA has, but they've kind of had some financial messes over there. Their NIL isn't what it needs to be. Things like that. It's not like Chip Kelly didn't have any success there. They won like 8 or 9 games the last few years, and they're coming into the Big Ten. So you can see why, a coach like PJ Fleck would be attractive to a program like that. But, ultimately, maybe fit-wise, didn't seem like it matched to me. What was your sense from that standpoint?
Yeah, my sense was, UCLA needed to get somebody who had some experience in the Big Ten and was a sitting coach somewhere that could transition really quick. I think it's for them with Deshaun Foster, they'll have some continuity with the staff, but he's, a new coach going into the Big Ten. That's not going to be easy. PJ's done a pretty good job here, and that was attractive to UCLA, and they pretty much that's why they reached out to him. I mean, it looked like if he would have gone, yeah, that would have made sense for UCLA. There's some fit things. Yeah, he's been mainly in the Midwest. You wonder, okay, how would the row the boat thing translate? I think that's something teams can figure out. Yeah, I think it made sense a lot for them to be looking at him, and for him staying here, I think that makes sense too. It's he's built something pretty decent here, and he's got some continuity. He had some coaching changes in the offseason, brought in a new defense coordinator after Joe Rossi left for Michigan State. Bringing a new quarterback in the portal from New Hampshire and Max Brosmer. So, yeah, I think he's got some things pointing forward here too.
That said, when I looked at it initially, before I thought about the fit, I was like, if PJ Fleck is going to go, it didn't make. I mean, I should say it made a certain amount of sense to me that this could be a time where he would look at something else, just because last year was hard, right? Like he had the 11-win year in 2019. He had back-to-back 9-win seasons in 2021, 2022. Last year, they only win, 6 games after the bowl game. A younger team rebuilding, schedule's getting harder. It's not getting any easier in the Big Ten. Like you can see where there could be some, not concern on his part, because I'm sure he's confident, but you can see where it's like, if they have another year or two of struggle, do you want to kind of get out in front of that? So from my standpoint, I was like, my antenna was up because it felt like, okay, this could be a time where he's interested in going somewhere else, but fit-wise, it didn't make sense to me. What do you think about where he's at program-wise? Do you think You think he should be thinking in that way, or do you feel like he's got a pretty long kind of leash here to kind of get things back from where they were last year?
Well, I think he's got a long leash here. He's got his athletic director who hired him here in Mark Coyle. That's always an important thing to have as a coach. I think that last year was a bad year. We all know that they lost their final 4 games of the regular season, got into a bowl game on their academic record. By no means are they satisfied with what happened this year. Him being a competitive guy, I don't think he's one to run from a challenge. So I think he's looking to get it back to where it was. And you look at before this year, their last 3 full regular seasons, 11-2, 9-4, 9-4. That's not bad. I mean, especially that 11-2 one, they finished number 10 in the country, and that hadn't been done here since 1962. So I think we should realize that he's taken them to a pretty good level. Now, can he get back to that? That's the challenge, and it becomes more of a challenge with the expanded Big Ten.
Yeah, although there's also an expanded playoff now where you think about it and you're like, if you're one of the 12 best teams in the country, you could go to the college football playoff at some point here. You're thinking about, where this program stands. And you made a good point earlier, too, where whatever we're thinking about Fleck, whatever happened last year, this would have been a disaster for them in the short term if he would have left, because this is a bad time to be looking for a coach.
Yeah, and I think, if he was looking, I thought we might have seen something earlier in the offseason. You always look at a coach, how long he's been at a place, and sometimes is it better, if they reset at a different place? In a way, that's what Joe Rossi has done. He's gone to Michigan State. I think, after a tough defensive year this year, he's there. He's got more of a, I guess I wouldn't say honeymoon period, but, it's kind of, you're not going to feel the heat right away, I don't think.
Couple more things on this that I want to transition to Gopher hockey, but just, Chip Kelly going from UCLA to a coordinator job at Ohio State. Obviously, that's a premier program. Does the fact that there's been a few head coaches that have taken coordinator jobs, does this underscore just what a pain in the butt it is to be a college head coach these days?
Yeah, very much so. The BC coach did that and took the Packers defense coordinator job. You see Chip Kelly. He's got the ties there with Ryan Day, who he had coached at New Hampshire and worked with. When you look at what the NIL and the transfer portal, what everything, when you basically have 2 periods of free agency every year where any player can leave for any reason, that's a big headache for coaches. When you get to the pros, you don't have to deal with recruiting. You don't have to deal with an NIL. You might have long nights. The perpetual guys, sitting there, spend the night in the office and preparing. But it seems like a more stable lifestyle if you can stick at a place for a while.
Yeah, for sure. And final thing, I mean, you mentioned there's another portal period opening up. Is that April that happens?
Yeah, there's an April portal period, basically after most places either are in spring practice or at the end of it. So that'll be we'll see if the Gophers add any during that time. There's probably a chance they might land a player or two, and they could have a few players transfer out if things, don't feel well during spring practice for them.
So is that kind of the thing? We got to wait until spring practice to kind of know what they might be looking for there, or do we have any foreshadowing of what that might bring for them?
I would think they would wait till spring practice to see what these guys what everyone looks like. Right now they're in winter conditioning and stuff, so that you're not seeing a lot of the football type stuff.
In April, the Gopher men's hockey team might be hoping to play for a national championship at XL Energy Center, but getting ahead of ourselves, they're number 8 in the pairwise after a sweep this past weekend. 2 shutouts, Justin Close. Didn't you write about him right before this great weekend he had?
Yes, I did. I did a feature on Justin last week, and I didn't jinx him, which is nice to see. Sometimes it's a Star Tribune jinx when we do a feature on a player who's done well, and then on their next time out, they might not do quite as well.
He seems to be, goes without saying, 2 shutouts. He seems to be rounding into kind of the top of his game. The whole team kind of seems to be ascending at the right time. Is that a good way to put it, with just 2 series left before we start the postseason?
Yeah, they're playing very well right now. They're on a run of 6-1-1 in the Big Ten, and they're 9-2-1 since the start of the new year. A couple of those games could have easily been the other way. They had 2 goals disallowed at Wisconsin a couple weekends ago. That was, you flip that one, then they're looking at 3 consecutive sweeps. They're rounding into play. They're getting a lot of different contributions. Justin Close gets for the second straight week, gets Big Ten #1 star, and then Aaron Huglin, who had 2 goals and an assist on the weekend, he got the 3rd star. They're getting great play out of Rhett Pitlick. Mason Nevers stepped up this weekend. So it looks like they're rounded into shape pretty good. They've really solidified themselves where they would have to be pretty bad collapse now not to make the NCAA tournament. They were at the beginning of the new year. They were kind of muddling around 12, 13, 14 in the pairwise, and that puts you on a bubble. You don't want to be there. And right now they're 8. They could move up a little bit. They're probably going to be a number 2 or a number 3 seed. My guess is that there's a good chance they'll end up in Sioux Falls regional. Not for certain. You can see everything changes when you have upsets or whatever, but I think there's a decent chance they go to Sioux Falls, and I would guess there's a pretty good chance they might have North Dakota in that regional too. North Dakota is number 2 in the pairwise. They're not the host in Sioux Falls like they have been in the past, but I know that the NCAA, that what they've done with the Sioux Falls regional and the Fargo regionals over the past few years is they've loaded up with Minnesota or North Dakota in there. So back in 2018, we had 3 Minnesota teams in Air Force in there. Last year up in Fargo, it was the Gophers against Canisius, but then the other game was St. Cloud State and Minnesota State. So they tend to like to put a lot of teams from the area in that regional, and if you do that, you have a good shot of getting somebody from that region to the Frozen Four. And I think they would like that for Frozen Four purposes, the NCAA.
Well, that makes sense, especially with the Frozen Four here this year. Now, Justin Close, obviously a guy that kind of came out of nowhere when they needed him a few years ago when they had that kind of midseason departure. He's not surprising anybody anymore at this point, but what has his trajectory been like?
Well, yeah, it's nuts. Here's a kid out of Saskatchewan who really didn't have any offers. He came to the Gophers as a walk-on, 3rd stringer. Didn't really play. He saw mop-up duty a little bit. Then Jack LaFontaine leaves for the Carolina Hurricanes when they run into a goalie, some injuries and some COVID problems, and they had to get another goalie who could jump into the NHL level real quick. And he played a couple games and then got set down. But Justin's just been steady. You talk to the kid, he's just really level-headed kid. Not doesn't get too high, doesn't get too low. Very calm in the net. Very good positionally. Yeah, and he's definitely playing some of his best hockey right now. He got his fourth shutout this year on Saturday, and now he is tied for the career shutout record with Kellen Briggs and Adam Wilcox for the Gophers.
Those are some names from the past. It's I haven't thought about those guys for a little while, but got to have it during the tournament. You got to have goaltending. I'm sure it's made Bob Motzko's life easier. I'm sure he was just panicking a few years ago when he didn't know what he was going to do.
And Bob always tells the story. It's this is the strangest strangest story in his coaching career, and he goes, "How dumb am I for not starting him before I did?" So he had a couple good goalies ahead of him at the time. With LaFontaine, who won the Richter Award one year, and then Matt Robson before him. So it was tough to crack that lineup, but he basically was thrown into a really difficult situation, and he's taken them to help them to get the 2 Frozen Fours, and they're aiming for another if they can get to St. Paul.
Couple more things for you. They've got Notre Dame this weekend on the road, and then they've got a bye week, and then home against Michigan. And then it's Big Ten tournament time already after that.
Yep, yeah, Big Ten tournament. The first round is a best of 3. Right now, it looks like they probably would play Penn State again. Then you go. The second round is a single game the following weekend, a single game elimination type deal, and then as it's a championship the weekend after that. So, which is kind of it's a long. They kind of stretch out their tournament a little bit, but I'd kind of like to see it more compact. But it is what it is.
It does feel a little strange that they wait that long, but I guess, I mean, you got to give them some rest, give them a chance to get gear up for the postseason and, maybe get a Big Ten team to win it all. And there's, 3 really good Big Ten teams this year, right? I mean, Wisconsin and Michigan State are both above the Gophers, both in the standings and the pairwise right now.
Yeah. The Big Ten is, that what's really helped, with places like Wisconsin, they make the coaching change to bring in Mike Hastings, who's done very well there. Brought a few of his players from Mankato with him, and they've been pretty tough. Michigan State hit the transfer portal very hard, and that's paid off. Those teams are going to be ones to reckon with going forward. The Big Ten is not a pushover conference by any means. They're right up there. I know Hockey East is having an outstanding year. They have a BC at number 1 and BU at number 3. Maine like at 6 or 7. That's pretty good. Big Ten's right there with them too. Three of the top 8 teams in the pairwise.
Well, certainly for your sake, and I think for the Gophers' sake too, I'm glad that you can focus your energy on this and not a coaching search right now in football.
I'm very thankful for that.
All right. Thanks, Randy. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks a lot, Mike. Appreciate it.
Royal Credit Union's smart checking accounts offer no monthly fees and no minimum balance. Enjoy financial freedom when you open your Royal Credit Union smart checking account online at rcu.org/go-checking. Insured by NCUA.
Really good stuff from Randy and a postscript to our conversation about Gophers hockey that I did not realize. Last 3 times the NCAA Frozen Four for men's hockey has been in St. Paul, a Minnesota team has won the championship. Gophers in 2002, Minnesota Duluth in 2011, and again Minnesota Duluth in 2018. Why is that relevant? Well, the Frozen Four is again, of course, in St. Paul in 2024. Can a Minnesota team do it again? Right now, certainly the Gophers are the best hope. Like Randy and I talked about, they're number 8 in the pairwise, almost certainly going to be a 2 or a 3 seed this year, barring some sort of collapse. Would be harder to see them get up all the way into the top 4, but hard to see them falling, into the 13 through 16 range. St. Cloud tied for 11th in the pairwise right now. They seem like a solid bet to make the NCAA tournament, but maybe, in that kind of low 3, high 4 territory, also depending on conference tournament upsets, things like that. Not a lot else going great for Minnesota teams in college hockey this year. Minnesota Duluth has a losing record. They're down at number 25 in the pairwise. Minnesota State has a winning record, but their strength of schedule isn't that great. They're 28th right now in the pairwise. St. Thomas 34th, Bemidji State down at 40. So not a great year across the board for Minnesota teams, but the Gophers do give them a chance right now to make it all the way to get to St. Paul. They can win, get to the tournament, win 2 games in their regional, and then get to the Frozen Four. You could see them having a chance this year. I know last year's team was the one that was supposed to win it all. They were so close. They were so loaded up. Sometimes it happens, though, that the team you don't expect, the one after the one that had all the talent, sometimes that's the team that jumps up, gets there, and gets it all done. If they can get the goaltending they got last weekend with 2 shutouts, they will be well on their way. But just keep that in mind. Kind of a quirky fact, St. Paul has hosted 3 of those tournaments in the last 22 years, and each time a Minnesota team has won it all. Gophers, like I said, with the best chance of the Minnesota teams to keep that streak going in 2024. Let's finish with the cooler. A couple of things in the cooler. Gopher women's basketball. They are in a massive tailspin since the injury that ended Mara Braun's season. Looked like they were maybe going to be an NCAA tournament team, or at least an NCAA tournament contender, but they have lost 6 consecutive games. And Tuesday, maybe the low point in that, 81-73 loss at Rutgers. Rutgers was 1-12 in the Big Ten coming into this game. The Gophers were up by 10 points after the first quarter. They just fell apart, and you can tell head coach Don Plitza-White is frustrated. Kent Youngblood talked to her after the game. She said, "We're not disciplined. We'd better figure out how to guard." She also said, "We don't do the little things very well. We just aren't disciplined. We're giving them post touches. We foul." Very frustrated with this team right now. A team that really hasn't been all that resilient in the last 6 games after Braun was injured. They're not doing the little things they were doing at the start of the year, not playing the kind of defense they could be playing now. They're 4-9 in the Big Ten, a team that was, like I said, trending towards being an NCAA tournament contender. I think actually the last time I had Kent on the show, they were like, it was right before they went into this tailspin. I'm not saying I jinxed them. We didn't jinx them. This just happened. But he was talking, I think they were like, in the tournament watch, they were like a 9 or a 10 seed projected at that moment. Nowhere near the tournament right now. They're just kind of in a tailspin, and Plitzowite is, kind of beside herself. She says, I wish I knew what happened in this game. I wish I knew. I don't know if it was as if their attack was different. They're just not getting it done right now, and that's difficult. I thought Plitzowite was doing a great job this season. I'm not saying her coaching has changed. Certainly the personnel changes when Braun gets hurt, but this is not a kind of tailspin that I would have envisioned from a team that seemed pretty tough, or at least kind of developing a toughness identity at the start of the season. One more thing. We talked about PJ Fleck with Randy Johnson earlier about, kind of the UCLA rumors, how he put those to bed. Now UCLA has a coach, so not worried about that. One other thing in football coaching, major football coaching in this town caught my eye the other day. It was just one of these random things I get all the time. Odds of the next NFL coach being fired, or first coach to be fired in 2024. I clicked on it. I get these emails all the time. It's kind of annoying, but sometimes I click on them. I'm like, okay, what are they saying about the Minnesota team? And the odds said Kevin O'Connell. Kevin O'Connell was on the list. I think he was like 6th on the list. So that's like, you got to think about it like there's these established coaches who aren't going to get fired no matter what, probably. Andy Reid just won the Super Bowl. He's not going to get fired. There's a lot of coaches who are very solid. And then there's a bunch of coaches who just got hired. Those guys aren't going to get fired either. So you can probably, right off the top, you can eliminate 10 to 12 coaches who certainly aren't going to get fired. So that leaves like another, 20 maybe. But Kevin O'Connell being 6th kind of caught my eye. Nowhere near the top, of course, or not in the very top line. Mike McCarthy was up there for sure. Guys who are maybe on thin ice going into the year. But it was like, really, Kevin O'Connell? And I was like, kind of shows you how things can change quickly. A year ago, 2022, his debut, they were 13-4, the charmed season. Everything was great. There was these great locker room speeches from KOC after the game that we got to see. Everything was going right. Yeah, they lost in the playoffs, but there was still some optimism. And then last year, things, up, down, losing quarterback, 7-10 season. Now you go into this year and you're like, okay, what would put him on the hot seat? Well, we don't know this for sure, but we've talked about this on Access Vikings before. We believe this is year 3 of a 4-year contract for both he and Kwesi Adofo-Mensah. So it is kind of a, hey, got to figure this out this year, or it could be kind of a hot seat territory. So there's that to it. If they get off to a slow start, if things don't go well, if they've made certain decisions at quarterback or whatever it is that don't work out, I can see him catching some heat. Doesn't feel like they would make an impulsive move like that so soon. But, you start to think, okay, this is kind of a big year for him, even if you don't see it as a make or break year. Then you think, okay, well, who would they bring in if they did decide, hey, we got to cut bait right now? Well, on his staff right now, the defensive coordinator has been a head coach and was quite a success story for most of last year, Brian Flores. So made me think about it a little bit differently. I'm not saying this is like we're on Kevin O'Connell watch right now. I think he's done a good job overall in these 2 years. I think he was dealt a tough hand last year that he didn't necessarily play all that well, but he gets some grace for how he navigated his rookie year, 13-4, things like that. His overall record still in this league is 20-14. That's still really good. So I think this is a prove-it year to a certain degree. I don't think it's a hot seat year, but I will frame it as a prove-it year to a certain degree, especially after how last year unfolded. So maybe it was a good thing I opened this email. Got me thinking a little bit differently about Kevin O'Connell and where the Vikings stand going into 2024. That will do it for me. Chip Scoggin should be joining me on Thursday's show. Star Tribune columnist. Whole bunch of stuff I want to talk to Chip about, including probably some more of this college football talk. Until then, I'm Michael Rand, back at it again tomorrow.